Okay. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. Amma ba'd. Today we are going to talk about a new scholar. The name is al-Turtushi. He is also called Ibn Abi Randaka. This scholar has done a very impressive work, which we call Siraj al-Muluk. We'll talk about it later. But when we talk about the life of Turtushi, he was not that quite famous. He is also one of the very authentic scholars from Spain. So this is al-Turtushi. He is basically was born in Tortosa. That's why it is called. He is called Turtusi. Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn al-Walid al-Turtushi. The capital of Tortosa is from Catalonia, Spain. And he was born in the year of 1059. He was able to live until 1126. So according to Hijri, it's exactly the similar time period of Ibn Hazm. So better, he was known as al-Turtushi, was one of the most prominent Andalusian. He was also a Islamic scholar. At the same time, he was also a political philosopher of that 12th century. So you can call him as a political Andalusian political scholar, philosopher of the 12th century. He became quite famous for his one of the most important work, whereby he talks about the political theory. And this is one of the book was actually impressed by, this book give a lot of impression to, it influenced Ibn Khaldun. In fact, when Ibn Khaldun was writing his Muqaddimah, he actually stating about Sheikh Abu Bakr Muhammad al-Turtushi and his work, which is a Siraj al-Muluk. In English, we can call it the Lamp of Kings. So most probably, he talks about the political theory that to be produced in the medieval Islamic world. He was basically from Maliki school. So most probably, he became, later he was also called as a counselor for princess, because during that time, his book actually became a kind of manual for every princess, the kingdom. There were so many kingdoms. They call it Ta'ifa. Those days, they call it Ta'ifa, means kingdoms. And he actually traveled so many places. He also went to Zaragoza, the other places like, in Cordoba, the other places in the Spain, all over. He was actually, he became the student of, first of all, he became the student of Abu al-Walid al-Baji. If you remember this word, maybe some of you may remember this name al-Baji, because I told you when I was talking to you about Ibn Hazm, I actually referred to you a story that there was a scholar who came and argued with Ibn Hazm. And he said that, you have given all money, because Ibn Hazm was actually, it's like was born with silver spoon. So he came and criticized Ibn Hazm, saying that you have given all sort of resources to learn knowledge. And, the person who was arguing, it was actually Abu al-Walid al-Baji, because Abu al-Walid al-Baji came from very critical, poor background. So he has to learn knowledge after so many efforts and hurdles. So he was the one who was actually criticizing Ibn Hazm. And then, if you remember the story when I talked to you, so that scholar Abu al-Walid al-Baji was the teacher of al-Turtushi. So the same Turtushi also went to Ibn Hazm at the same time. He also went, and then he also learned, familiarized with the philosophical and political treatise that was written by, the polymath Ibn Hazm. Yeah. So he traveled for knowledge so many places. He went as far as Baghdad. He was in Dimishq, and later he was settled in Alexandria. He was in Misr, Egypt, and then there were so many. Eventually, he settled in so many dynasties. When he was in Alexandria, it was actually Fatimid dynasties, where he was actually he taught at a madrasa. And also there were some rulers against something, so he was actually against of those rulers as well. He also issued some fatwa those days. So these are the things according to his background. In fact, he was also uh, uh, yeah, as I told you, his book. Yeah, when we talk about his book Siraj al-Muluk, it is not only by it is not only received by the viziers, I mean the wazirs or the prime ministers. It was also a number of scholars and intellectuals also, they praised his book. As I told you earlier, even Ibn Khaldun is Muqaddimah. Yeah, there are some fundamental disagreement when you talk about Ibn Khaldun, but Ibn Khaldun still he quote from Turtushi. And also there is a title for Turtushi, as I told you earlier, Counselor of the Princess. Because what he is doing, he is actually sharing his own views on kingship and also, kingsmen, statecraft, statesmen. He lists hundreds of, reflections, countless examples. For example, he say how a ruler should be. An example can be given. He said this. This is what he said. Just a ruler. This is one of his metaphor or examples that he is trying to make sense to every ruler. He says that a just ruler should be to his people like what the rain is to the thirsty plants. Yeah. A just ruler should be to his people what the rain is to the thirsty plants, or even better, for the rain lasts for a while. For the rain lasts for a while, because when rain comes, it goes after some time, while the blessings of justice are timeless. So he tried to bring the idea of, when there is a thirst, thirsty plants need water, but at the same time rain might come and then go back. But justice is something that there is no time for justice. I mean, it has to be there all the time. So these kind of wisdoms, he is trying to teach in his book Siraj al-Muluk. Yes, other than that, Tartushi could be not famous like Ibn Arabi. I mean, like there are so many Andalusian saints and scholars. We have so many people like Ibn Arabi. I think some of you heard of the name, and you also know Ibn al-Shatibi, right? So these are the famous Andalusian scholars, Qurtuba scholars. So he might be not famous like these great scholars, but his work, Siraj al-Muluk, would inspire a generation of writers, because there are so many. It is becoming a masterpiece for Islamic. If you want to look political idea or philosophical idea or economic idea, because as we discussed earlier, you cannot separate politics from economics or economics from politics. That's why starting from Greek philosophers, they also have this political economy, because it was all together. Even today also, let's say if there is a ministry of economics, it works only under the government, because we're talking about macroeconomics. Microeconomics is what people are doing. But when it comes to macro, you need an administrator, government to guide, to set the protocols, to set the rules and regulations, to follow certain restraints and all. There is a need of government. Then only that is the reason. That is how we are actually focusing on our GDP, what we call it today. So you cannot separate politics from economics or economics from politics. So at the beginning, yeah, scholars, they were writing so much in politics, what they call siyasa. But the meaning of siyasa, it's not restrict only what we call today politics. The meaning of siyasa also include all kind of economic activities today, what we call it management or finance or business dealings, including the administration. Everything comes in the word like siyasa. All right. That's why you need to know that when Ibn Taymiyyah talks about what is it, al-Hisba, al-Muhtasib, when he talked about Hisba, you know, he talked that under the book of Siyasa, Siyasa al-Shara'iyya. All right. So, okay, so you can see here, yes, his name was Abu Bakr Muhammad ibn Abdul Wali, Muhammad ibn al-Walid ibn Muhammad ibn Khalaf ibn Sulaiman ibn Ayyub, born in 451, Spain. Abdul Walid al-Baji. He traveled to so many other places like Iskandria, and he was in the Fatimid era. So I think we talked about this. Okay, so this is a major work. Only 9 out of 22 of his work still available, where the rest are reportedly among his books, reportedly missing. So I was able to find some of his book, which I will be sharing with you in the next slide. Among his books, Siraj al-Muluk, A Light of Kings, is the one that will be focused on our study because of the economic thinking is there inside the book Siraj al-Muluk. It is a book on the political and economic conditions of Egypt during the reign of Fatimiyah. So even though he is not from Egypt, see, he came from Andalus. He's from Tortos. Today it's in Kaduna. But he actually was settling in Egypt, and where he was actually teaching in madrasa. While teaching madrasa, he was able to write this book. So that time, it was a Fatimiyya was the ruling. Yes, it is still under Abbasi period, Abbasid period of time. So, but in Egypt, it was actually Fatimiyya were ruling. It focused on the law that were directed at the ruler and the people, explaining how an improved relationship and welfare interest could nurture through various corrections to the system. Yes. So these are the books that I found so far. Several writers opined that Turtushi had completed 22 books among the written books. If you want to know more about him, so these are the books are there. مختصر تفسير الثعلبي، الكتاب الكبير، شرح الرسالة، كتاب الإسرار، كتاب الحوادث، كتاب أعارض به كتاب الإحياء الغزالي، كتاب نزهة الإخوان، كتاب الأدب, and then finally you have اختصار الأخصار رسول الله, then finally you have Siraj al-Muluk. Okay, in Siraj al-Muluk, what was his economic emphasis? So when we look into the book of his Siraj al-Muluk, we found that he talked about 6 issues. He highlighted 6 issues. So we are only going to cover today these 6 issues, starting from wealth. So when he talk about wealth, you know, yes, he actually talk about the wealth accumulations as well, with protection, accumulation, preservation, distribution. So to start with, he talks about wealth. A country should own a sufficient amount of wealth. When property utilized, it can be the source of the strength. It could preserve the firmly established the ruler. It could be a major force against the enemies of the state. So building a wealthy nation. Yeah. So you need to these are the slides actually might make you understand um, the how Islamic scholars in 12th century Islamic scholars were able to talk about the wealth of nation. Only 17th century Adam Smith was able to write on wealth of nation, but 12th century they already started talking about wealth of nation. So this is the clear example in front of you, right? So that's why uh, when classical scholars, sorry, when historians they started writing the history, they somehow avoid looking into these history. I don't know whether they did it intentionally or maybe they forgot to do it, or maybe they don't know what they are doing. But the truth is, whatever that happened in the medieval time, the contribution of Muslim scholars were not being mentioned anywhere. So that's the reason why we are bringing this class to show you the proof, because this is the proof. How can someone deny this? How can someone deny this? This is, we talk about 12th century. The book is written, the book is available until now. The original book is available in the museum, the original manuscript. Anyone who knows Arabic can go and read. There is a translation as well available, of course. He talked about this wealth. He says that, the wealth could be a source of the strength. It could be preserved to firmly establish the rule. It could be the major force against the enemies. This is what actually we talk about wealth of nation, right? So he talked about it. So wealth management, if you're looking for a scholar, you want to talk about wealth management, and this is the scholar, whereby he talked about the protection, accumulation, preservation, distribution. He also talked about, what exactly is the distribution. It is the establishment of a practicable system of economy, enabling everyone to get what is rightfully due to him, eradicating the concentration of the wealth. So he deeply goes into what we call today wealth distribution. It is not about only the Muslim scholars are talking about zakat distribution. Most of the time, when we call distribution, we say zakat accumulation, zakat distribution. This is the wealth, the national wealth that he is actually talking about. Like earlier, the scholars that we talked earlier, like, starting from, Nizamuddin Tusi, or even before that, Ibn Hazm, right? Or after that, we talked about Al-Ghazali. So you can understand that how interestingly, even Abu Ubaid, interestingly, they talk about the land that belongs to the government, and then the government are qualified, or they have to establish a system whereby they can collect the taxes, and then they run the government. The property comes income. So this is all actually talking about the wealth of nation, and then the distribution of the taxes, the revenue of the taxes. This is all actually was already there. If this is not economics, then what is actually economics? Right? So this is all comes today. Actually, of course, today we became well expertise in our field, and then we needed more a specialization. That's why today actually we are going specific, because today there is a market for those expertise. So now we need a financial analyst, we need a management expertise, we need an economist, and then there are so many kinds of economists that we are having today. Yes, today, yes, of course we need. That's because of there is a demand for expertise in certain field, and to become someone that you can always go back, to become someone that you can, at the end, you have to end with him so that you can get his opinions. There is a need. That's because of the services and supply that we are doing. But those days it was all together, right? That's why when a scholar talk about distribution, he also talk about other types of economic aspect, not only financial aspect. He also talk about economic and management, everything together. Yeah. And then when you talk about land development, you can see Turtushi urged for development of the nation's land. Peace could be attained through land development and is related to the potential volume of kharaj that could be collected following a maximum utilization of the landed resources. Yeah. Yes, he talks about the kharaj, but it has to be follow the maximum utilization. Turtushi urged the development of nation's land, encouraged the development of the resources, potential volume of kharaj could be collected. So kharaj, he says, a land tax which is imposed on developing land. The tax revenue become the nation's income. A stable slash good nation's income give a result in a good economic conditions. So most probably, I think the Islamic scholars, they were not only talking about fiqh. They were not only talk about, which is halal, which is haram. They were not only talk about what is makruh, what is mustahab, right? So you need to understand the pattern. I think if there is one advantage of taking this class for you, I think this is what, because you are here understanding the evolution of the Islamic scholastic scholars, Islamic scholars. Yeah, Islamic scholars. What I'm trying to say is you need to know that how versatile were the classical Islamic economic scholars, Islamic scholars in common. Because today, all right, today we call certain scholars, group of scholars, we call them Islamic scholars, right? For example, uh, we have many scholars in madrasa, in Pondo, right? We have many scholars, like we call them mufti, right? We call them muhaddis or mufassir, or we call them Imam Muda, yeah? Or we call them Azhari or Madani, right? Or we call them Sheikh, yeah? We call them even in like, for example, the countries like Saudi or Emirates, or countries like subcontinent like India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, for example, or our country like Malaysia. So we have the understanding that who we are calling the Islamic scholars. We call them Islamic scholars based on their knowledge in Islam, based on their knowledge in Sharia, because they know what is right, what is wrong. They know what is halal, what is haram, because they know they can give you clear picture of what you get, uh, what what is right in the Sharia, what is wrong in the Sharia. uh, so what method is allowed in Sharia, what method is not allowed in Sharia. Okay. So they can also give you the understanding of dunya and understanding of akhirah. They can also spiritually, they can guide you what you're supposed to do for akhirah, what you're supposed to. That is most important thing. I'm not saying that that is the most important thing that they are able to do. But this is what our understanding today of what we call Islamic scholars. But as I told you earlier, the one advantage of taking this subject for you to understand that the evolution of these Islamic scholars. But back then, those days, Islamic scholars, they were not only giving you the spiritual guiding. They were not only giving you, what is halal, what is haram. They were not only giving you what is makruh, what is mustahab. They were also running the countries. They were able to write books like this, so that these books became the manual for the rulers. And you should know that how it is difficult to run a territory like this. We are not talking about one country. We are not talking about just one country like Dimashq or Baghdad. Here we are talking about the entire Islamic territories. It started from Qurtuba, Spain, until it goes to Khorasan, Afghanistan. It went until the Africa, right? So look how big it is. So now this is what actually our the medieval Islam. This is our experience that we were able to, our scholars were able to understand this, and they were able to. This is where they started learning from Quran and Sunnah, and most importantly, the Turath, that whoever follow the Quran and Sunnah and their methodology, and then they were able to extract fiqh out of those Quran and Sunnah. But later they didn't stop with fiqh. Today we are stopping at fiqh. Today, why, in my opinion, why a fiqh cannot help for Islamic economics? Because fiqh can only tell you what is right, what is wrong. Fiqh cannot make you develop something. It can only make you understand what is right, what is wrong. So what we need today is actually mujtahid, ijtihad. We need the reasoning, the people who actually can come up with plans, right? So this is where we're all talking about Islamic economics, whereby we want to come up with the proper plans, so that actually, you know, we can mitigate, we can actually destroy the problems that are in our surroundings, whether it is a financial problem or material problem. You know, there are so many sustainable problems. You know, there are so many issues actually covering. So there is a need actually for all of us to understand this, and then we need to learn this, and how the way, the method that they have done it, that kind of method has to be brought back. So that's why we have a two way of looking these things. One is relevantization. The other one is Islamization. The relevantization, we need scholars like Sharia scholars. The Sharia scholars, we want the relevantization from them. At the same time, we have conventional scholars, those Muslims who actually learn the conventional studies, for example, economics, like you are studying right now. So you are actually learning the conventional economics, right? So we want from them the Islamization. So this relevantization means what? Relevantization, because okay, when I actually teach you fiqh, when I teach you Sharia from Quran and Sunnah, I should know how to relevantize it to today modern world. I cannot simply give you the old examples when I teach you. I have to bring the current market, the modern world, the modern lifestyle, and how am I supposed to connect it. If I can read a Quranic verse to you, I should be able to connect into your understanding, so that actually you will understand, okay, this is something that what we are doing today. This is not just charama, because most of the time it becomes like a charama, and most of the time during Ramadan we are happy to hear charama. After that we just close, because we are thinking that it has to bring us the spiritual. So for the spirituality, we only use charama, but charama must be something that should be relevant to your life. This is what actually Imam al-Ghazali talked about it last week. We talked about it, right? So we should know how to connect dunya and deen together, because deen and dunya is not two separate things, not two separate entities. It is actually together. Yeah. So with that note, the relevantization is actually required from Sharia scholars. At the same time, the Islamization also required from scholars like you, right? So if you have already learning, like in university, actually we are all learning these secular conventional methods of, you know, with the conventional disciplines of economics or finance or psychology or political science or sociology or education or engineering or medical sciences. This is all actually we are learning the conventional disciplines. So once we learned, we should actually try to Islamize those things. So these two things should be done concurrently. When these two things are happening together same time, then only we can actually call it integration. So this is what we call integrity. Integration. Remember our universities, the four missions, sorry, the visions of the university. Anyone remember? You'll all become old student now, yeah? If you are the juniors, you will remember. It's called triple ICE. Triple ICE. Yeah? Islamization, integration, Islamization, internationalization, and comprehensive excellence. Okay, those who are going to debates always remember this, yeah? Okay, so the integration, remember, this is what we call integration. There must be relevantization and then Islamization. And look, when the scholars in the past, when they actually write something, it was actually relevant to that particular time, period of time. It could be relevant today. We need to make it relevant. This is what our job. This is why we are actually learning this. This is the reason why we are bringing this to the university student, so that they can actually relevantize it. And then later, once you learn about the land developments, I know now some of you already doing this land development, right, in your assessment. So this is all actually, this is how you actually you do your term paper as well. Later, this is how you do the overall comparison. Later, when you are doing your term paper, this is how I want you to look into it, the relevantization and also Islamization, and then how these things can become integrated, so that you can actually give an integrated modern economics. So you need to think of this, how you actually offer, how you can actually provide as a student of IIUM, how actually you can offer the world or contribute to the world and moral at the same time integrated economics. Yeah, that must be our objective. Yeah. Okay, he also talks about the taxation. The similar way, Al-Turtushi emphasized that taxable income must be imposed on surplus income only, which is the balance of one's income after deducting reasonably for its expenditure. So this is all he talked about 12th century until today. I know. I hope. I don't think that you some of you are doing, and I don't think any of you doing taxes. So we have to do as a servant of this university, we have to do taxes. So when I was actually doing the taxes, of course, I need to mention all my expenses, and then my expenses all, they will deduct it, will be exempted. The remaining money only taxable. So now, when I read this, it's like this is not something the modern system, modern taxation system brought. This is something that he talks about it in the 12th century. In 12th century, scholars like Turtushi talks about it, which is the balance of one's income after deducting reasonably for his expenditure. So today, when I do the taxes, so I have to mention how many the system nicely done. Yeah, it's online actually. So this is how it happens. Every month they will deduct my taxes. At the end of the year, I need to declare how much was my expenses. Then my taxes will be exempted. So I need to tell, okay, how many children I have, my wife, and then I have 3 children, for example. And then I need to mention what are the expenses. Let's say last year, what are the equipment I bought for the education, what are the medical expenses I had, everything. There is a column for me to fill up everything, right? So yes, the students of accounting, of course, they do this all the time. So you also, of course, know about all this because you also learn certain accounting classes and so many other things. Of course, you know all this. But this is something that I want to make it relevant today, what we are doing. So he talked about it in 12th century. See that? Tax collection could be optimized only after the fulfillment of certain conditions, such as, for example, these are the correction conditions. Tax collectors and administrators project benevolence and refrain from exploitive and oppressive traits. Number 2, the state must avoid any inflictions or commitment of injustice, oppression, and suppression. Tax must be imposed on surplus income only, balance of the day. Okay, tax collection could be optimized after fulfillment of certain conditions. Yeah, the same thing. Tax collectors and this must have noble moral values. The state must avoid any commitment of injustice. According to al-Turtushi, Kharaj is pillar of the state. Taxes is the pillar of the tax. Of course, today is easy to understand because today we understand the way of governance. But in 12th century, someone talking about it, Kharaj is the pillar of the state, is something that, you know, appreciated. So state financing, okay, again he talks about the utilization of state financial resources must be used for the interests of the people and not as a tool to safeguard the personal interests of the ruler. You know, this sentence that as he said, it should not be as a tool to safeguard the personal interests of the ruler. You know, anyone who want to say this, he should have a gut to say, you know, he should be brave enough to say this kind of word, because those days this was only the practice. You know, if you look any monarchy, what they do, they collect taxes and then they build their own palaces. They collect taxes, they make out their own vehicles and, you know, their own, you know, way of living, you know, their own. If you go to their palace, it looks like you are in the wonderland. But you come out from the palace and you go to any residence area, then you will see how people are suffering, right? So those were the monarchies time. So this was the only thing they were doing, but he was opposed to it, of course. So this is how a kind of what we call it today. Today, what we call it rational, you know, or secular, or what we call the democracy, the idea of the democracy. People vote for people, and among the people, someone will become will become the king, not king, sorry. Among the people will become someone representative, and then the representative will go to the parliament, and then they will form the government. So this is all the idea of this, you know, came from this kind of you know, sentences, this kind of postures. So when these things keep on repeated, then suddenly you can see the evolution happens. Yeah, you see the Arab Spring, when the evolution started, you can see how big it was, right? That's because you saw that, if you remember, I don't know whether 5 years ago, I think 5-6 years ago, I think in this same Ramadan, in the month of Ramadan, I think 5 or 6 years ago, you know, when they want to take out the government of Morsi in Egypt, and then people coming, and then Morsi was able to win the election after so many years of, you know, the previous president in the name of king or king in the name of president. So this is how they've been, you know, collecting the taxes, building their own. So they make their own military strong. It is impossible to even reach them, you know. It's impossible to reach. Today we have similar examples, like, you know, what's happening in Myanmar, the military, the force, they kill innocent people and all. This is all, you know, the power, the money that they keep. It's all happening. That's why. So these are the sentences are there. So many scholars talked about it. It has. So if someone in 17th century or 18th century comes with this kind of revolutionary ideas, it's not that just happened that century. It happened even before that. So somehow, you know, the work has been translated. It went there. What I'm trying to say is a collective knowledge. No one is actually owner of any knowledge. No one is actually top of the knowledge. Everyone is actually a student of knowledge, and this knowledge is actually a collective knowledge. We learn from someone, and tomorrow we will teach someone. Yeah, so you don't have to fight against the copyright, who did this, who said this first. Not necessary. All this knowledge is came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All the values, hikmah, wisdom, everything, there is no other way that it came from someone. It has to come from the creator, because he created us. He is the only, because when he sent down Prophet Adam, he said, we will give you the sustenance. There will be some time you will be living there. We will be sending. See, he said this. You go to the world, you go to the earth, there you already have sustenance. You already have. You go there, we have given you the ocean, we have given you the kettles, we have given you the forest and everything. So we have already given you the sustenance. There are fruits, vegetables, everything were there when Adam was coming. So the sustenance were there when Adam was coming. But Allah said this, you go there, we will be sending you the guidance. So guidance, actually, he said, we will be sending, meaning to say Allah is the only person. Sorry, not person, astaghfirullah. Allah is the only power that actually can actually give you the guidance. So he said, okay, we will send our representatives, we will send our prophets, we will send our Rasuls, so that actually will give you the guidance. So now whatever the knowledge that we have today, it's, if it is a good knowledge, it actually come from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who will be more eligible to receive those knowledge from Allah? Of course, Muslims are the first who actually will receive, because we are Muslims. We already submitted our will to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we are the first people who are going to have that knowledge, and then later we will be becoming the reason for the world. We will be what we call it, we will be distributing that knowledge to all of us, right? So this is where you can understand that the importance of the knowledge that we have so far distributed to the world, without expecting any any gift or any giving back. I mean, we didn't want any alternative or any answers from people. We just wanted to give. So we already gave enough. We gave, but the problem is we Muslims ourselves, we actually did not understand it. So that is actually the problem that we are having today. So state revenue accruing from taxation must be expended through various project that would result in further productivity, would alleviate society's burden of acquiring basic necessities. Then he talks about also the subsidization. See, this subsidiary that today we are having, this is not something came from 17th century. It came from 12th, even before. Subsidization of prices on basic necessities, the creation of public work, the concept of creating public work, So this is all there. Utilization of state financial resources must be used for the interest of the people. State revenue must be expended on various projects that would benefit the people. The benefits, like, for example, improving productivity, reduce society's burden of acquiring basic necessities. State revenue should be properly utilized so that it can lead to further continued growth of revenue and benefits. Then he talked about the social welfare. The social welfare, he said there must be a fund should be allocated from the Baitul Mal, especially for the widows and orphans. He also gives some numbers. This is impressive. He gives some numbers. How much should be given to the widows and orphans? So this is all something new on that time. You know why? Because at the beginning of that time, like, let's say after a few centuries after the demise of the Prophet ﷺ, of course there was a exercise of remarrying. Let's say if someone become widow, then there's an opportunity to get remarried, because men were allowed to go for 4. So there were so many wars been going on, and then the wives, they used to lose their husbands, and then they have to go for iddah, and then after iddah, they will be approached to get remarried. And then the orphans also will be given the guardians. So when someone remarrying, and then the orphans also who lost the father, the orphans will get a new guardian, wali. Yeah, it was actually in action, it was in practices. But time moves, time goes and goes and goes, and the things like when there were so many orphans, so many widows, where there were the opportunity of remarrying reduced. Remarrying actually not became the options, and then they need, because you cannot simply ask them to go to work, right? So these widows, they needed some sort of fund. So he introduced, allocate funds for, especially for the widows and orphans. Also, this is what the services that we are talking about, the civic services, for example, building bathing facilities, bathrooms, available clothes. If someone traveling to a country, traveling to a city, when he comes, he need an accommodation, right? So this kind of public accommodations, staying, and then offering some services, even offering free food and drink. This is all actually, he talked about it in his book. He proposed the building of bathing facilities, readily available clothing for anyone, considerable eligible food and drink should be also be made readily. If hardship was due to natural disaster, this is another one. He also talked about when natural disaster happen, like for example, today, what happening today, the governments are, mashallah, helping us, right? Helping us, giving us some fund and everything, stipends. So this is also, he talked about it, compensate with an amount that brought him back to his pre-disaster position. So today, yeah, we are going through few problems, of course. Yesterday who was, today he is not, right? So before the pandemic, many people, they were rich, but after pandemic they are becoming poorer. Yeah. So you can see he also asked the government to compensate lack of expertise, and he also talked about the bad management. He says that you should appoint a supervisor. During his time, that people were divided into two different groups. The first group are wealthy people, the other one is the poor people. He believed the unjust of income and way of living is a form of oppression. The oppression to the worst of, the poor, is a form of injustice. So that's where he talks about the social welfare. Then he also talks about the alternatives for different cause of hardships. So this is where he actually started asking the princes, the kings, to allocate funds. For example, for the Baitul Mal, for the widow, the amount was provided even during his time. The amount like 400,000 dinar. That's a huge money. Amount like 400,000 dinar was allocated, and then allocation of sadaqah, 200 dinar was allocated. With that money, providing basic needs and improve hygiene, building up bath facilities, like I told you earlier. Also the natural disaster, like I told you earlier. Also to lack of expertise. If someone is very bad in business management, he must be given training. So these are the things were happening in his time, and then he also reflect his writing on it. His concern, proper assistance must be taken place to the worst of group according to their needs of help. Guided. This is where he talked about guided economy, right? Guided economy, government intervention in resource allocation in order to intensify economic development. Priorities are raised and policies are developed to achieve the design goals in resource allocation and economic growth. By providing a guided economy which is consistent with Islamic welfare philosophy, it helps them to intensify or boost the economy by the improvement in the welfare of society and business management. Okay, then he talked about the corruption, mismanagement, and abuse of power. So he was quite opposed to the bribes. Yeah. In fact, he gave fatwa to a prince during his time against the prince. So bribes given under the disguise of presents must be acted upon the relevant authorities. Presents given as a result of one's position is wrong and prohibited. So this is all actually were happening during those days because of the monarchy, right? So he is bringing his writings and becoming against of it. So it is something you need you are required to have a certain amount of bravery to do this kind of thing. Stern action towards government officers involved in exploitative activities through the use of their positions. Officers should be made to declare their property ownership before holding any position. See, this is something actually we are doing it today. For example, as a IIUM staff, before I join the university, I need to declare what are the properties that I have. Most importantly, today, you look at the legislation today. For example, the election legislation. Before anyone, for example, someone want to um, run the election for president or prime minister or even member of parliament for the local area, he has to declare before he go for appealing for election. He has to declare what are the property that he owns, so that after the position, so that after the political position, so what kind of properties that he has, so that you can compare how much he earned, and if that is more than his salary, then of course he will be caught. So today, yes, we are doing this, and look, he talked about it in 12th century. All the officers should declare their property ownership. Okay. Okay. Against the utilization of state property for personal gains, his concerns on Islamic etiquette of the ruler, governors, and ministers. Failure to act upon this misconduct is equivalent to abusing the nation's right. Prohibits the act of accepting presents from others that were given as a result of one's possession. Yeah. Officers should declare property ownership, like I told you before. Stern action against wrongdoers, deterrent against future mismanagement, safeguarding people's wealth, state property utilization. Okay, I think that's all. This part I think I already given you earlier. Umayyad dynasty. We talked about this right before. Abbasid, Umayyad, timeline of Muslim dynasties. Okay. Initially, I wanted to tell you at this class, but since you requested earlier, so I think we talked about it. So I think that's all from me. So if you have any questions, feedback, anything, please, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Let me start the recording. Yeah.